So good afternoon, everybody. I want to introduce my esteemed panelists who are responsible for this fantastic book, MANDEM, a collection of essays by various Black men, artists, academics, all writing around masculinity and Black masculinity to itself. The very wonderful person who put this together is Iggy London, an award-winning filmmaker, artist, writer. In his debut short film, Black Boys Don't Cry, was adapted from a poem investigating stereotypical notions of masculinity. And this book really is a kind of, as for me, as a Black woman, it was a kind of internal conversation that I am not privy to. I felt it was very honest and very very raw and honest and thought provoking. And then I want to introduce you to Ashley Hickson. And is it Lovence?
Lovence.
Lovence.
Yeah.
One name, Lovence, who is a novelist, a lecturer at a lecturer of creative writing, is at UEA doing his PhD, and has had a debut novel, and another novel on the way. So he's a three-time novelist. And for someone whose novel is in the drawer, I applaud that. So I wanted to start off by asking Iggy to just read the poem that set this off, really, which is in your book, and if you can just start, and then I'll ask you some questions, because I thought that set up quite a good context for the book if you haven't read it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love your intro. It's made me feel really nice. I feel like, oh, I'm a pro. But yeah, this poem is called "We Built This Man," and I hope you like it. We built this man. We built this man on white vest tops. We built this man on the image of Fella himself. We built this man on spices and herbs firmly pressed by mothers and fathers scattered on the poverty line. We made this man of parked cars and park benches, on hope tightly squeezed between success and failure. We built this man so far removed from the norm that he's too close to freedom, built in the underbelly of the rhythm of the central line, just so he could learn that freedom is wisdom in the face of danger. We built, we fought, we buried. Built no man more deserving than the infant man, too broken to fix but too functional to be in pieces. The infant man, born by unhappy. The infant man, born by unhappy, trigger-happy, made men that left suicide notes in the form of love letters to the dead. We built, we fought, we buried. We built this man on the hands that still remain accountable. We built this man.
Thank you. I thought it would be interesting to talk about that, because actually it felt that each of the essays in this book talked about the building and the on-building, the kind of bricking, there's a phase seems to be of innocence, and then there's a place where masculinity or Black masculinity or Black boyhood, where there's a kind of moving over, crossing over, so to speak. But I first wanted to speak to you about, so you have this poem, and you decide that you want to put together this book. Let me ask about the curation of the book. How did you know who you wanted to put in? What was the assignment, and did they follow the assignment?
Yeah, I love that. The assignment was a simple one, to be honest. I feel like the idea of the book came actually from curation. As a filmmaker, all I think about is how do I best represent the idea, and who do I need to be part of that idea? Who do I need to call upon? Like when you build an idea, you have a tune, you have a deck, or you have a brief, and you need to respond to that brief. So ultimately, I was thinking about who are the people who are going to make the idea or the project happen. And I thought, going back to the people that I've always spoken about masculinity or manhood in this way. So some people I knew, like Jordan Stevens, who's a rapper, artist, and writer, right? And then
I think
what-
if you stop for a second, I think it keeps going in and out.
Sorry, okay, cool.
So I think they're going to bring you a handheld mic now. Okay, yeah, continue.
Yeah, this is good.
That's better, yeah.
Love that.
Start all over again. Start all over again.
Love that. Now I can hear myself. All right, this is good.
So start from the curation as a filmmaker curating.
Yeah. So yeah, it kind of started from that, like figuring out what my opinions are, figuring out who were the people that I really wanted to work with, and ultimately, it meant that I reached out to like loads of black men, writers, artists, dancers, journalists, people who were in their field, and asking them to talk about a very personal matter that they wanted to talk about that they hadn't spoken about. And so ultimately, I wanted it to be quite vulnerable, and I wanted it to be honest and raw. So that's why I knew that was the component for it. So I kind of contacted people that I knew that were like up for it. And yeah, so some of the people that I've known already, like Jordan Stevens, and then a couple of people like Yomi Shode and Shope Shortan, who I knew that they were like journalists, or they wrote their own books, or they wanted to write more books and things like that. And then other people that I've been a fan of their work, such as Ashley, I've just known your work and just thought it was flipping great, so I thought might as well be part of the book. And then contacting them to say, would you like to be interested? What do you want to do? What do you want to talk about? And I think it kept it authentic. I just wanted it to be like honest. So if their real response was like, I want to do a talk, I want to talk about this vulnerable moment that I had when I was in school, then I was like, yeah, why not? So I shaped it from there, and I built it.
Great. It is a kind of distinctive voice, but then all the voices together have echoes and speak to each other. I'm not going to ask you, Ashley, about your project as yet, about your topic, but I'm going to ask you about something that seemed to come up, interesting enough, that everybody had a lot of people seemed to talk about the period of innocence, when they were just observing their parents, understanding life. And then there's this day or this incident that kind of makes them have to start thinking about the fact that they're in a black body, about what black manhood is. Some people seem to say it was in school, wearing a particular thing to school. Some people it was at the shop. They came out of the shop and how their bodies were looked at. Some people, it was a conversation with their parents who was like, yo, this is what's happening. What was it for you?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because you're right, there always appears to be this seminal formative moment where your blackness comes into sharp focus. And actually that can be quite shocking, quite hard to deal with, it shapes you, shapes who you become, because you realize actually that you're different, which actually is, takes dealing with. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I suppose with me, I don't think there is that one formative, seminal crux point. My family, like many families, is made up of different individuals and nationalities. Like my grandmother is Irish, and I've always, I think from the very first, from as early as I can remember, I've always been fascinated by the dynamics of race. Why my nan, who was from Ireland, didn't want to talk about the fact, to her family, that she married a black man who was my granddad, and so it's always existed in me, and that's why I was so passionate about writing an essay about this, because I feel like in all the work that I write and everything I do is informed by that dynamic of being a black man in predominantly white spaces often. So when Iggy asked me to do it, I thought absolutely, this is my chance to have a voice and speak about those things. And yeah, there isn't one moment, because I feel like for me it's just innate, this dynamic of being a black man in particularly white spaces and having to navigate those spaces, having to act a certain way. It's daily, it's daily from as early as I can remember, really.
I suppose the other thing I wanted to ask you is, I know Remy at the lodge in her book, Why I'm No Longer Speaking to White People About Race, talked about not wanting to educate. And I was thinking about this book, and it felt like this book was a conversation And this book was a conversation open in like a trigger conversation to open up further conversations with other Black men, to have Black men read it and have conversations. What are the things that you think in this book that you would have wanted this book to enable you to start unpicking or unraveling? Or what is the toxicity? And a lot of people came back to race, class. It's very London-centric as well. There's a lot of Londoners writing this book. And so postcodes and area codes, and almost shielding up, almost getting this thing that Black male is this, it's this, it's this, and it's perpetuated on you. So in a way, I wondered, what are you trying to unpick? What are you trying to open the conversation to? If we weren't in this room and they were this room was full of other Black men, what would you say to them, to try and unpick, to start? Yeah.
Well, first of all, the thing that we have to also understand about Black men is we're complex. In every sense of the word. Like, for example, like how I started the book is actually, I went to a party and I saw loads of my sort of like friends who were girls coming together, and I was like, in COVID, I wasn't supposed to have parties in COVID, but I still had parties in COVID. And there was this one sort of party, I was like, I'm definitely gonna have to go to this. And we went and had the best time. But I saw so many women that hadn't seen each other for such a long time come together, and they were just absolutely amazed to see each other. And it was almost this like ritualistic thing where they were just celebrating each other, they were looking at each other, they were super happy to be around each other. Have you seen Black men speak to each other? We go, yo, hi, yo, cool man, yeah man, safe. That's the dialogue. That's actually how Black men actually speak to each other. They go, yo man, I'm trying to be like you. Yeah bro, I'm trying to be like you. There's this like feeling of like, oh, like we don't want to go in too deep. And I think that there needs to be, and the reason why I had the book, and we wanted to, this book is really about like men to really talk and discuss and have their own sort of thoughts about their own masculinity, their own manhood, but also understand some of the dialogue and the conversations so they can put a name to it. They can put a name, and they can put a title to things. They can put an experience to things. And ultimately understand that then there's way too many similarities than differences in terms of their experiences. And that's the one thing that I feel like a lot of Black men don't understand, is that there's another Black man who's probably experienced exactly the same thing that you're going through. And I wanted there to be a dialogue or a language that they'll be able to resonate with them and connect to, that they can be able to say that that's their own, and then have that connection. And I think that that's what I really want the book to be about. It's not necessarily trying to show a picture to other races and other experiences and other groups to look at it and be able to understand the Black body and the Black maleness, if they would like to, so they can choose. But it's more so about Black men being able to have the dialogue and the conversation to actually have those conversations with themselves. And if they're not necessarily doing it already, they can do it with the comfort of their own home. That's the most important thing.
And I think, what this book does so well is that it captures like the vulnerabilities and in a very candid nature of being a Black man sometimes. And there's lots of crossover, like you say, between the different essays. So we have things that are quite taboo or perhaps doesn't quite fit the sort of, the archetypal makeup of a man or a Black man, scared of dogs or, dresses a certain way or, perhaps is a gay man who has, whatever it is, like it's breaking those molds, breaking it down to say, look, a Black man isn't just one thing, it's wide ranging, it's nuanced, it's rich, it's diverse. And I think that's, again, opening that conversation and continuing that conversation. This book doesn't have all the answers, but like we were saying before, again, in the green room, like this is continuing a discussion about, what Black men can be,
Yeah. It felt like it doesn't feel like a book that's trying to give you answers. It actually feels like a book that's just provocative, that's actually in conversation with each other. And I felt like I was in conversation with it. I found myself speaking back to some of the essays. I felt myself like shaking my head going, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't. I felt like I was let into a world that's very closed. I wanted to come to you, Ashley. And I remember reading Mannerism by Yomi Sode, which is another amazing book, which is in conversation with this book, I would say, about Black masculinity and vulnerability, and all that kind of good stuff. But there was a bit where he was talking about Dave being at Glastonbury and bringing this young white fan on stage. And then his book started to break down what happened afterwards, that this white fan was celebrated and was given all these interviews, while Dave, who is the originator, was interviewed, but not asked the same questions, was interviewed through a lens of violence and post-Cold Wars, and you touch upon that in your essay. I thought that opened up, Yomi's work opened up a world for me in terms of drill and grime and artistry, and how, again, another generation, how Black music is being viewed. But I felt that your essay then took it deeper. I wanted you to just elaborate on some of the things that you were speaking about in there. But first of all, when you got the assignment, I love this, I love this word, assignment. When you got the assignment from Iggy, I think it most probably went something like this, like Iggy's not there, right? It most probably said, I'm trying to write this book around Black masculinity, I'm being new here, and I'd like you to contribute. Why writing about drill? Why that in particular? And what did you think that gave to this particularly landscape, this tapestry that's the book?
Yeah, I mean, music is a big part of Black culture generally, and music is very important to me as a person. Music is very important to me as a writer. Like you said in my intro, like that, I've got 2 books out, 1 book coming, and all of it draws on the musicality of prose. I love repetition, I love alliteration, I love sibilance, I want my prose, I want my stories to sound like music. So when Iggy asked me during the pandemic, I believe, he's putting this book together, and I've got Jordan from Rizzle Kicks. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be in it. Yeah, absolutely. I love Rizzle Kicks. So I gave him, I sent Iggy a list of things that I'm interested in, and I'm interested in football, I'm interested in music, and Iggy said, go for the music one. And it seemed to work really well because my background is as a secondary school teacher, and I would often ask my students, or they would tell me, that they were listening to drill music or grime music, and I wanted to try and decode that genre as much as I could. I wanted to understand why it was so prevalent, why they were listening to it, what was good about it. And they would recommend me songs, and I'd be like, yeah, do you know what? That's actually quite a good line. That's quite a clever line. That's quite a smart line. So yes, drill music, and drill music is a sort of rawer version of grime music, which is a rawer version of like sort of more generic hip hop music. But there is something beautiful about the lines and the structures and the puns and the playfulness. Yes, it doesn't come without problems, but for me, in most cases, it's allowing young people a voice that they don't get in other mediums, in other spaces, and I think we should listen to it. I think we should listen to what they're saying and think about how we can respond to it in ways that, for the betterment of these young people's lives. They're often, through a very coded language, through a very sort of colloquial slang language, they're saying stuff about society. They're saying stuff about being marginalized. They're saying stuff about being judged. There's a reference in there to a duo called AM and Skengo from London, from South London, who were imprisoned essentially for a year for playing a song. And I just don't think that's, a good thing in any kind of way. And I just want to, open up the channels to see, okay, what is this music saying? Yes, there's problems to it. Yes, it can be associated with slipping and post-Cold Wars and all that sort of thing. But what is the message behind there, and how can we decipher that? And what does it say about our young people today? And how can we use their love of this quite problematic genre to try and, make life better for them and understand them and give them a voice and give them a platform? So yeah, it was really great to write, and I'm obsessed by language. I teach creative writing at universities, and I was like analyzing lines in detail and stuff. And
you did it so well, like to the point where what also you didn't say, which is like the epicenter of the whole chapter, because you're humble, is because the way he structures it, the way he talks about this artistry, he talks about it in the same respect as Shakespeare. And I think that that's why I love it so much. That's why I love the chapter so much, is because like we generally like speak about the fact that drill music should be considered in the same light, or have the same appreciation, or at least the same importance. And so when we are referencing Shakespeare, we're referencing another poet, we're referencing whoever we're referencing, we need to also like understand that these people will also be part of the conversation, because it's as equally great, it's as equally powerful, like and magical. Here's some of the references and how they connected to football, they're connected to like class, or they're critiquing society.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that that's like, just because it's in a song doesn't necessarily mean it's not magic or art.
Yeah, I wasn't going to let him get away with that. No, I wasn't going to let him get away with that. Because the next thing I was going to say is that you provide a really microscopic literary criticism of the genre of, you took particular lines and looked at it and deconstructed this is referencing EastEnders and what that means and what that's doing, or this is referencing football, and by saying this, it's referencing this particular aspect. And interestingly, when you did that, I thought of Blake. I thought of William Blake, Holy Thursday. I thought of William Blake writing about the ills of society and writing about the rich and the poor, and really deconstructing what a religious society, and what the hypocrisy of that society is. And I don't think I would have gone, I don't think, listening to a record without reading you, I would have been like, oh, this drill and Blake. So I wanted you to speak more about, and even talk to the audience. One, there were two questions I had. One, I wanted more. I think it was a shorthand when you said he played the record, he went to jail. I was like, what happened in between? Like, how? Was there a ban on the record? Blah, blah, blah. So I wanted you to elaborate on that for me and for people who are going to read the book, because I know they're all going to go out and buy it afterwards. And two, I wanted you to kind of break down for one of us the lyrics like you did, because I think that gives us so much of an insight into the lyricism, into the mastery of craft that you're showing, where we hear about, oh, they're masked, they're this, it's dangerous, the youth, so yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned Blake. I taught Blake, I was a secondary school English teacher for 5 years, and we were analysing Blake and the poetry anthologies, and obviously there's lots of really great stuff in the canon. I think the archetypal canon has a place, but I was also thinking, how does this relate to the demographic of students that I'm teaching? And I would often use song lyrics from not just drill music or grime music, but pop music as well, and thinking, okay, so what are they trying to say here? What's the message behind that? I've always doing sort of close textual analysis and unpicking the words, and actually, like I said, there's real beauty if you really strip back the uniform, strip back the sort of the connotations of what it means to be a young black man singing these particular songs. There's actually real craft in those lines. There's actually real power in those lines. I think it might be helpful if I just read a couple of paragraphs. Would that be okay? A couple of short paragraphs?
I must say that I was hoping you would do that, but I wanted you to do it on your own.
Okay,
so
sorry, no worries. I won't labour it, but I'll just read, I'll bookend it with the sort of first two paragraphs and then the last two paragraphs. Okay, so I actually live in Norwich now, quite rural part of east of England, and I go into schools and I teach poetry, and so this is where it begins. I'm in the Ford Focus on my way to teach a poetry workshop to Year 9 in a rural secondary school in Norfolk. Along the winding country lanes that take me there, I'm blaring out the song Crazy Year by Dimsey, LD, and 6-7.
You're reading like a drill. You're reading too fast.
How is it?
You're reading like you're rapping. It's like, just a little bit slower.
This is how I read. It's poetry. You remember I talked about the poetry?
I know, but it's like, we're like one sentence behind you.
This has
and it's
become
so beautiful, I don't want us to lose it.
Okay. This has become a routine. A good drill song blasted out at full volume makes me feel fierce, energized, empowered. It makes me want to move. And at that exact moment, driving in through the school gates, I'm ready, inspired even, to facilitate the use of similarly personal, playful, and poetic language to the students I'm about to teach. And I'll just skip a little bit. And it goes without saying that UK drill music is about more than groups of young balaclava-clad black boys outside council flats making violent songs about selling drugs and stabbing people. The content within these songs is evidence of musical storytelling. It's a form of cathartic social commentary centered on the lives of young people living in the fringes of our society. Drill is also a platform to voice a response about the trials and tribulations of 21st century life in the UK, stop and search, rising food bank usage, recession, Brexit, COVID, Boris Johnson, the cost of living, all of it. Without doubt, there is more to drill than the suggested criminality. A listener must delve deep to appreciate the beauty of the lyrics, the clever wordplay, the topical puns, the rhymes, and even more deeply than that, the nuanced notion of brotherhood during the toughest of times. The next step now is to entice more people from outside the usual listenership, like my rural Norfolk Year 9 class, to listen with an open ear and mind and appreciate one of the most brilliant genres of our time.
I'm going to ask you one more thing,
Yeah, sure.
just for me, but also it's such a treat. I would love to ask you to just one of those places where you really do a literary breakdown of what is actually happening word by word, either the EastEnders or the football. I think because we're here in Bradford, in the north, I think the football might be a bit, football or EastEnders. But I think it is something that you should hear. I think you do that so brilliantly.
Okay.
That we really, I love the paragraphs you read, but I want that. I think as a poet and an artist, I think a lot of our work as Black artists is not critiqued. It's not looked at as a literary thing. It's looked at as the performative, or it looks at this Black art. So it's really wonderful to see someone take and break that down in a way. So yes.
Yeah, so if I were to leave you with one song recommendation from the drill genre today, I mean, there's many but that I love, but this particular one I really love, and it's called BLM, and I think that speaks for itself. And the artist of BLM is a young rapper called Banduke. Banduke is from Broadwater Farm Estate, which is in Tottenham in North London. In the 1980s, there was a big riot and a police officer lost their life in this riot, so it's always had this reputation. But Banduke is the son of Mark Duggan. Mark Duggan was shot by the police, also in Tottenham. He has this song called BLM, and it's this section that I read now is about that. Is about that. It said at just 19 years old. He's about 21 now, but. At just 19 years old, Banduke, the son of the late Mark Duggan, who was shot dead by the police in 2011, is certainly one to watch. As part of the collective Original Farm Boys, Banduke's work often exposes an understandably deep-rooted distrust of the police. But despite the trauma of losing his father at such a young age, regularly demonstrates his versatility to weave between subject matters of varying poignancy. In October 2020, Original Farm Boys released BLM, featuring Abracadabra, a song that masterfully samples Coldplay's 2000 track Trouble with its widely recognizable piano chords. The track is a response to the murder of unarmed black man George Floyd by a police officer in America. Filled with profound lines, the lyric, "Police on my back because I look like my pops. Hold up, stop. Because of that, why do you want me locked?" cuts particularly deep, as does, "They'll see you in the group and they'll call you a gang." Similar to the unjust treatment of AM and Skendo by the authorities as aforementioned in this piece, it's seemingly not easy for drill artists, often young black boys, to shake off being seen as the source of trouble by the police, even when, as we've come to understand in recent years, that they should probably be looking closer to home for evidence of wrongdoing. So that's from BLM, and I'll do another short bit, which sort of talks about. You said football. You said football, Macaulay. Yeah, football. Okay, we'll do a bit of football. We'll do a bit of football. Okay. All right. So this is from Match Day by RV and Heady One. This came out in 2019. And the lyrics are, I couldn't care about Lineker or Janice. It should be me and Rev on the panel. How many times did we score? Excellent finish. You should have just seen the net. It just rattled. Scored so many points from back in the day. We should have come first on Match of the Day. All we did was attack like Robin and Drogba. We didn't need no Makelele. And I've gone to say, the semantic field of football is employed with the inclusion of field, boots, net, tackle, all these words. However, RV, as he so often does, adds another dimension to the clever complexity of the wordplay by making specific reference to Robin and Drogba and Makelele. Furthermore, the reference to coming first on Match of the Day implies that their actions within the song, which are ambiguous, are worthy of opening the programme, an honour that is often bestowed to the best performing team on the Saturday night football show. So I really unpick the language and really say that there's more to it than just, the problematic connotations of what they're talking about. There's so much depth there. I mean, I could do this. I'm passionate about it. I could do it for the whole book,
Yeah, no, I think
do another one. Do MANDEM too.
No, I think you need to. There's another book here if Jacaranda's in the house. But I think there's another book here, like Gray. I think there's another book here. Which is really looking at the lyrics and analyzing the lyrics in a poetic thing. I was fascinated by that. I might be the only audience for it because I'm a poet and I'm interested. I wanted to ask, in this book, because there's so many other contributors who are not here, is there anybody's work that you particularly like that spoke to you, that you want to tell us about, so that we can maybe have some other people here and us experience what they have done. I'm going to leave you for a minute to take a break after that exquisite exploration of lyrics, and I'm going to come to you. I know I'm asking you to play favorite, but if something stands out that you would really love to tell us about for us to explore in the book, who is there one person or a few people that you would tell us that this is interesting, or what they're talking about, or anything like that?
100%. So for me, I love everyone in this chapter.
Good answer.
Every single person's chapter is amazing, and therefore is super exciting. But I would say that there's a bunch of chapters that I just connect with, mainly because of the writer. I love the writer, and I love what they stand for. So I have this personal connection with everyone. But also, like, for example, Etienne. Etienne's like, I don't know how old Etienne is, but he's like super young.
Maybe like 19, maybe?
19.
Really?
I taught Etienne, actually, which is so funny.
Yeah. Touring with Lil Connor at the moment, and he writes like poetry and like this, like, he's just an amazing writer. And he speaks about, he's gone to university. And he basically speaks about like the idea of like get rich and die trying. This idea of like, I basically have to make it by any means.
Yeah.
And that means, and basically this kind of feeling that it's beyond like my struggles in life or my mental health can be solved by just making money. And there's this kind of like typical sort of thing that you may have with other people, like if I just got £1 million, if I just got this, if I just did that, if I got a car like this, everything will be fine. And not discussing the actual sort of systematic issues or systematic systems in place that actually just break, not get you that opportunity, or like there are more things at play, whether we sort of sacrifice our mental health for this idea of wealth. And also he breaks it down from a musical perspective and goes, and utilizes all like lyrically what we're kind of like hearing to understand that is that the discourse, is that the conversation, which I think is really great.
I would say,
I think one of the things that he does as well, really well, is he actually shows what is shown of as Black excellence. And so he shows that Black excellence is shown as these high earning rappers or these athletes. And that then the idea of if I could is almost unobtainable because the role models that you're shown, which was quite fascinating to me and fundamentally something I had not thought about. But go on, say what
No, you're absolutely right. It's a brilliant essay. It's near the beginning, and I feel like tonally it's quite similar to mine because it is quite like I don't know, there's a rigor to it, isn't there? Whereas some essays are a bit more personal, with a personal slant. So I think that's a nice balance there, where we have a bit more of a sort of, I don't know, sort of more formal tone, and then you have the mixture of like the more personal tone. And like Iggy's, for me, I know you didn't ask me the question.
Yes, I am gonna. I'm
But
asking
for me,
you the
my
question.
favourites were both of Iggy's, like the first one, and then there's one in the middle as well, because I just loved how the first essay sort of sets the tone for what's to come in relation to all the things that we talked about, sort of insecurities and vulnerabilities, but also bringing black men together in this. But then later on, it's about dating, right, and feeling like ghosted, and we've all been ghosted in our life sometimes. You know what I mean? So I think that's, for me, Iggy, you've smashed it by bringing us all together, but also 2 fantastic essays as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say that I suppose because I know Yomi and I was a mentor of his, and also because I admire his work. I love the insight that the essay gave, and I love the way this essay builds from it's like a birthday card, and the idea of birthday, and then being out with the boys on a birthday, and then starting to understand that actually this ritual of being out, it's not a safe space, and we don't converse. And then how it starts to underpin mental health, fragility, masculinity, and what the MANDEM is. And I found that quite fascinating. I read that several times because I felt like I was kind of understanding something that as a woman I don't have access to. And I started thinking, right, my 20-year-old cousin's getting this. And I just started to think about all the birthday presents that were going to be books to some of the boys, young boys. And I remember taking Terrell to see Yomi's play. And Terrell was 16 at the time, and he came out and was like, I want to take all my boys to see this, because he was like, yeah, I didn't know about black boys grieving, and it really opened up a conversation with him and his peers and who he went back to see. And I feel like this book is doing the same thing, and I feel really proud that all of you, young black men are opening these conversations and really unpicking masculinity. But you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was also going to say in terms of a play, there was a play which to me basically is like a play version of this book, which is for black boys. And I've never seen something so poignant, and like when I feel like for such a long time, my favorite film in life is Bugs Life. And for the longest time, it was Bugs Life and Mulan. And it's so crazy because obviously these are like cartoons. But for the longest time, I don't feel like I ever really saw like my own work or my own sort of like life mirrored into like any sort of like filmic work or anything like that. But when I saw For Black Boys, like I was like, wow, like suddenly it held a mirror to all of these stories that we were experiencing. And similarly, I just think holding that mirror to society to let us know that we're not going insane. These are sort of part and parcel in terms of our life. It's such a unique thing, especially a young adult can actually have that. Like they can have a blueprint into like how their lives can be shaped if they would like it to be.
Yeah. And also, I think it's talking into that tradition of, you mentioned bell hooks, and you mentioned, and I would mention Ross Gay and Ta-Nehisi, and we have all these American writers writing around social and mental health and political issues, and I think it's really a maverick book in terms of it's writing from the Black British perspective, and it's writing out of the Black experience. We'd love to open it up to questions. I know that you're dying to ask questions, but also sometimes we feel that we have to have a profound question. But that's not the case. And it might be a comment that you have, it might be something that you want to feed back, and that's fine as well. So I'm just warning you that we're opening up to that in case people do have questions about this fantastic book. And I'm just going to do a kind of show advertising like that, so that when you go to the bookshop and you're overwhelmed by all the books, you remember this moment like that. Yeah. So yes, great. There's a question over there.
Thank you so much. I love your essays. Thank you so much for writing them, and thank you, Dr. Miranda, for it. It's so gorgeous. We're so delighted to have you here. I have a few quick question for you as curator. Obviously, you had the final chosen writers for MANDEM, but you must have had a short list of writers that really wanted to feature and weren't able to. So I'm thinking about the chapters that could have been and the essays that could have been written, and I wondered if you might give us a sneak peek of maybe who might feature in MANDEM too. Sorry, some sneaks.
Yeah, it could. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, basically, it's so funny because I have also emailed and contacted a whole bunch of people, some being Edward Ennifor, to like, hey, would you like to write for this? And, Ashley Waters, and Reggie Yates, mainly because I wanted to have the intersectionality of like all those different sorts of generations and what they grew up with and how they sort of experienced the world, right? But in terms of like, if I was to ever do like another sort of like segment to mirror or be an extension of MANDEM, I think it's about bringing people who don't necessarily write and asking them to be part of this kind of like subject matter. So often I feel like, you're preaching to the choir when it comes to these kind of conversations, and like people already know what they've done the work, they've spent time thinking of themselves, but it'd be so nice to bring like, Stormzy, why not? Like Yellow. Like I would love to hear like Stormzy, Dave, I don't know. It just helped like just all these different stories and bring them together as well, combining like stories from like, aspiring like writers in schools and colleges and like artists in their own right in different sort of like mediums, and asking them to really be part of that conversation and seeing what, stories that they have, I would say. Yeah.
I would piggy bank on that as people are preparing to put their hands up as I look. But do you think there's any kind of follow-on project from this? I know that during the lockdown, Yomi had these online kind of programs or events. Do you think there are any follow-on that you might do? Seeing that you're a filmmaker and you're kind of multidisciplined in your artistry and also in your vision, and you use the term, interesting enough, curate and curating people and curating conversations. Yeah, do you see other spawn of things or things that you dream about to develop from this?
Yeah, you ask good questions. Basically, I'm basically in conversations and pushing the bar out in terms of making this into like an anthology for like a TV series, anthology, breaking down different stories and seeing how like we can embed all of the different sort of characters together into one sort of MANDEM anthology. That would be sort of my main dream in terms of having it being an extension of another sort of thing, but from a different medium. And like how I would incorporate them as characters, like every single subject or every single chapter is kind of like explored through a character, and all those characters know each other and how they interweave, and whether it's from like the same community or like whether they sort of like they're friends and you start there and end there. So I'm kind of like currently sort of like exploring that idea, because I think it would be great to see this in live and in color. That would be so beautiful. And also just continuing the conversations, like making sure I'm able to like be in many sort of like panels like this and conversations in different spaces in schools, and building that sort of like different mediums like theatre shows and like and talks and like speeches in different places. That would be like my sort of like dream in terms of extending it, for sure.
Yeah, no, because I think there's so much possibilities. I was seeing MANDEM book clubs around the country. Is that kind of a realization or a kind of tentative?
It's a tentative.
Right. 1 minute. This is coming to you.
It's just interesting that you mentioned schools, because I'm sitting here thinking it feels like a school project to me that you could get, with maybe totally different areas of the country, and maybe record, like voice speaking privately or anonymously about, certain issues that you could, like you could give them a list of questions perhaps, or just leave it wide open. But I thought that would be really interesting if it is difficult for them to communicate and then maybe publish.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah, creating a forum for them to
Yeah.
have. Yeah, it's a really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also just filming that, so then showcasing it. Because my thing is that how do you sort of like extend the conversation so it can be played and it can be used yearly, throughout time, and it surpasses a 1 hour conversation. It's more than that. It can be people can play it on their phones whilst they're going to school, or people can like watch it as part of like a lesson, and also other people who aren't necessarily black and male who can be able to identify with those type of conversations and be like, I understand that, or I can teach my brother about this, or as a mother, I learn from that, and I think that's where it goes beyond sort of the reading of it. It could be used as to inspire, to inform, and I love that. I almost like that documentary idea of like just placing a camera and a mic in front of these boys and asking them to answer questions. Really good.
We've got a question from this lady here, and then we'll go to the gentleman in the back. So we've got.
So you made comments in the book, I've not read it yet. How much do you think growing up in London plays into black masculinity for you? The experiences for someone like black men in London are completely different to someone from Bradford. So how do you think the experiences are universal no matter what part of the country from you will experience these? Or do you think a lot of it is because of sort of cultural London, black cultural London?
Yeah.
And before you answer that, this gentleman had his hand up, but is you saying you have to go? So if I can get your question at the same time so we can multitask so that you don't leave unfulfilled.
It's just that there was in the description, it said that you touch on black queerness and the role of masculinity within that. So I just wanted to know if you could say a few things. I mean, I'm doing a talk basically later on toxic masculinity at 3:30. Not too but I think there's quite an interesting. I don't know what's the fine line of what you can say and what you can't really say with regards to kind of in a patriarchal kind of like system. So just more on queerness.
Yeah.
Great.
So I just saw you had your hand up and then you were like, I have to go. So I thought, let's try and get both your questions. So we'll just answer his and then we'll come to you. Is that all right?
Sure. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah, so those. Yeah. Okay.
There's an amazing writer in the book called Phil Samba, and he talks really cleverly and honestly about condomless sex, and he's a queer man, and he speaks about this whole the way in which sort of like black masculinity and black bodies are sort of commodified and like kind of used in this kind of like way to from an exchange, and he talks about like the apps like Grindr and Tinder and how they're kind of like utilized, but also he speaks more about the cautions and like the sexual health and talks about it so honestly in terms of his own experience of people abusing the system or abusing sort of like consent. What does that mean? And as a black man, when you're sort of commodified, what does that mean? Like, is there a value in your body when you're saying no and someone continues? And like, what does that mean to abuse trust, especially when that person doesn't see you for more than just your body? And I think that's something that's like, I don't want to like go into it too.
But we have to.
There's still vilification.
Yeah.
The space of, I know we're trying to actually expand the conversation, but there's still this kind of name calling and which actually is quite intrinsic.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Thank you.
Sorry, no, it's no problem. That's okay.
And just if you quickly touch on the sisters and then I'll just just quick.
So yeah, basically, I was born and raised in London, but my parents have a Nigerian background, and like they are. So I think some of the things that I kind of like grew up with were on the basis of them migrating, and I think one big issue that I've had, or not an issue, but a thing that I had to grapple with in terms of my masculinity is having the discernment to understand what is mine and what's theirs, what I can actually explore, what I can't. And so for a very long time, as being, you know, a son of like, of them who migrated and all they had is like just their suitcases, and they had such a desire to like for me to succeed, and so they lived vicariously through me. And I feel like that pressure sort of like stops people from being able to live very free lives. And so to a certain degree, I feel like that's kind of like a universal thing for that sort of experience, that community. But then there are other things, and growing up in London and like, you know, being a part of the group and wanting to kind of conform and like, you know, being part of ends and the struggles in postcode wars, or the struggles with like being in different communities and what does it look like, I feel like are very specific. But you know, I think there's more sort of like things which relate in terms of our own experiences.
Yeah.
And that's why like you can go to Bradford and you could meet and someone from London, they could have a similar sort of issues. It might just be a different context, but like, and how they come about and how they resolve them are completely different. But ultimately, it does come from it's shaped by certain pressures, which are
A lot bigger than that.
Yeah, much bigger than just like your area, I would say. Yeah.
So we have to finish here. Thank you. I know some people over here had questions, but I would say, you know, buying the book, getting it signed, and then having further conversations. But it's a very fascinating book, and I think it's maverick, and I think it's in conversation with people like Caleb Femi's book, which is poetry around architecture and inner city London, and in conversation with books like Mannerism by Yomi Sode. So you know, I felt like reading those books in collection. But I'd like to thank you for curating this fantastic book. I'd like to thank you for your contribution. And I'd like to thank you for being a patient audience and kind of being really all right with that English reserve when I strolled in looking hot and flustered. And thank you for coming out. If you would buy the book, get it signed. And thank you. And I've been Malika Booker as well.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you so much. Thank you.